I think being Laura Collins was certainly a chance to become strange, weird, metaphysical, spiritual, um, dark side, light side, all those things. But I think I got that from having been that way all my life, which is a rather strange thing. I think maybe Laura Collins made me realize that, hey, this is me. I've always been this way. Little do they know, I'm not acting. I'm just playing myself. So it was a challenge, I suppose you could say it was, but when you're awfully young, nothing seems to be a challenge. Everything seems to be, oh yeah, I can do that. And that's a wonderful thing. And so I can only say that I just had a fabulous time doing it. I looked forward to whatever was going to happen the next day. Hopefully it would be weirder than ever, because I would make it up. I had every bit of confidence that I would make it totally believable. Louis Edmonds played my husband. And what a terrible husband he was. Forgive me, Louis. I loved you in real life, but you stepped on my marks, you stepped on my toes, you forgot your lines. We had more fun making things up as we went along, and we just had a great time. He wasn't exactly my idea of the greatest person to play opposite. Sorry about that, Louis. But I certainly adored him and loved him and was with him right up until the day he died. David Hennessy was, without question, and how many times have we had audiences ask us, was it terrible to have those children, to be the mother of those children? It was paradise to be the mother of those children. Just because you're little and young and short doesn't mean you're an idiot. Child actors, while it's maybe difficult to be one, and perhaps we shouldn't all be child actors, they were divine. They never missed their mark. They never missed a line. They barely screwed up. They were, I mean, I just adored them both. It was truly a pleasure to work with these children. I considered them while I was on. I considered them truly to be my children. I can always remember the scene where the beam fell down that was burning. Do you remember that in the first part? That wasn't meant to happen, and that fire came so near my child, I grabbed him as if it were my, I mean, they're your own when you're playing the part. They were wonderful. I loved them. They were terrific. What more can I say? David Hennessy, of course, we all know, was my son. And then later on, Denise Nickerson played my daughter, most enchanting little girl. It was heaven to have these two kids be so professional and so wonderful. I love them. Joan Bennett I knew many years before Dark Shadows. When I was 16 years old, my agent sent me to California to do whatever it was I was supposed to do, a television show. And it was Christmas time. And my agent said, well, you know, you've been such a good girl. I'm going to take you to a party. And I said, oh, great. And we pulled up in front of a very modest little house in Beverly Hills, went in, and the door was opened by Joan Bennett. And she said, oh, my dear child, I have heard so much about you. Now, come over here and, you know, I want you to mingle. And there were at least, I would say, 15 to 20 very famous people standing around. I naturally was totally overwhelmed and sat in a corner. Suddenly this lady came over to me and she said, Diana, Joan has asked me to take you around. You have to mingle. Well, that lady was Greer Garson. She took me all the way around the entire house, the dining room, the kitchen, the living room, the library, and introduced me to, I guess, every star I've ever heard of. And that was the beginning of my life in California. And Joan became my friend. You know, called me, how are you? What are you doing now? What can I do for you? All those. She was the true mother. The true mother. And then, lo and behold, here we were, working together on Dark Shadows. Quite amazing, wasn't it? And of course, I gave a party, fortunately, before she died at my house for as many of the actors as could come. I don't really have a favorite moment. Every moment was delightful. I would just say that the soliloquy at the beginning, when I talked to my son, was so well written, so well thought out. I think everybody should read it. I really do. I've asked to have it printed and given out to fans, which I certainly have never done. You know, maybe sometime I should read it again. Because it was something that everybody loved. I loved it. It was my favorite moment, obviously, on Dark Shadows. The soliloquy to my son, my beautiful son, was really a lesson in spirituality, in reincarnation, in living forever. And I just think that it was something that, well, I know it was something that everyone remembers. And I think that's a very wonderful thing. I had the opportunity to explain reincarnation, to explain the fact that we may leave, but we come back and back and back and back. I don't know if everyone else believes it, but my son David did. And that was all that mattered. Very few people realized at the time, nor do they really know now, that I was actually pregnant when I joined the cast of Dark Shadows. Barely pregnant. But shortly thereafter, I did put on weight. And I would have to say that Ramsey Mostella, the wardrobe mistress, was so clever that I think I was practically ready to give birth before they ever figured out I was with child. And she did a really remarkable job. I wore black velvet in layers that made me rather flow from one room to the next without anyone having any idea what was wrong. Although a few members of the cast said, "Don't you think you're putting on weight? Or don't you think you ought to go on a diet?" And I'd say, "Oh yes, I will. Very soon you'll be surprised." And very soon I gave birth to my gorgeous, beautiful son, Kylie. So the whole thing was a rather wonderfully kept secret. We had a great time. I believe that Dark Shadows is so mesmerizing to people because secretly, whether they know it or not, everybody wants to know that there is another side of life, that we can all make magic in some way, that we all have within us a spiritual, metaphysical ability to fly. You know, I must say that being a phoenix is not something that everyone has the pleasure of doing. But I did. And far and away, it was my most memorable, delightful, fun experience. I shall never forget it. And amazingly enough, the fans don't forget it. They hardly call me Diana. They either call me the Phoenix or Laura or think of me as something other than who I really am. And I consider that rather a compliment, don't you? It's really rather wonderful. I'm thrilled to death. I'm a happy camper. I loved doing the Phoenix. I loved doing Dark Shadows. It was an honor.